Hey guys, it's White Cross, and this is the first in a series that we're going to be doing on more advanced topics when it comes to physical silver bullion holdings. If you began watching our videos at the very beginning, and if you subscribed, I appreciate it. Some of the earlier topics that we covered were a slow introduction to what is 90% silver and then also 999 silver. We talked a little bit later in the intermediate series about the virtues, the positives, and the negatives of a little bit more intermediate topics of both 90% and 999. So now we're going to move on to some of the more advanced topics. In particular, in this video, we're going to be discussing coins, 999 coins. And in the earlier videos, I made a very strong departure between the coins that are made by a sovereign country and rounds that are made by a private mint. For the sake of brevity, and because we've got so many topics to cover, I'm going to kind of mash those back together again. So this video, the first coin video, 999 silver, advanced topics, and there'll be at least two of those in the series. And we did that because the rounds and the coins, similar in nature. This video is going to be the 1 ounce version of both of those as opposed to bars. And we will cover bars in another couple of videos in advanced topics also. Before we start, I wanted to give a couple of disclaimers. First off, obviously, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not a trained or schooled financial advisor. I'm not trying to offer you financial advice. I'm simply trying to show you some of the things that I've done in the last 25, 35 years of buying and selling bullion on a regular basis. So this is my own personal experience. That's what I'm trying to bring to these videos. And hopefully there will be some concepts that you can use in your own physical precious metals holdings. And to start off, and this will apply to all of the different videos in the more advanced series that we're going to talk about. These are some of the key concepts, and I want to touch on all of them. Like I said, these are applicable to all of the advanced videos, and I just wanted to give a quick rundown of them. The first thing is that these items that we're going to be talking about are a bit of a gray area. And what I mean by that is that there's nothing wrong if you decide that you want to own precious metals and you want nothing but, say, generic 10-ounce bars or bars by Scottsdale or somebody like that, a modern bullion maker. Or if you'd like to have just plain rolls of silver eagles. I understand that idea of keeping it simple, and I'm a big fan of that, especially if you just don't think that you've got the capacity, the time, or the interest to learn about some of the more esoteric items that are available within the idea of physical precious metals holdings. There's nothing wrong with keeping in the middle of the road. There's nothing wrong with not making this a big part of your life. If this is something that you want to do, keeping it simple is definitely a fine option, and I have no problem with people who want to do that. So these are a gray area. These kind of straddle the area between bullion and collectible. So gray area, that's first. Collectible versus not intentionally to be collected or non-collectible. What do I mean by that? Well, there are some products out there that are intentionally designed for collectors. I myself have never been a fan of those. That's not particularly interesting to me. What I find interesting and what propels me is those items that were never meant to be collectible but have become collectible over time for various reasons. And we'll touch on some of those reasons in this video also. The concept of buying and holding is one that's always been important to me. I'm not somebody that tries to buy and sell items in my physical precious metals holdings quickly. I'm not looking for a quick dollar. Buying and holding is something that's important to me. I decide that something is what I want to have in my collection, and I keep it there for quite a while, and that has worked out for me in the past. And then the final concept I wanted to touch on really quickly is attrition. Attrition is just that. It's the idea that over time, things happen and fewer and fewer pieces are available than when they are first released. It doesn't happen all the time, but I'm talking about things like having to sell something, items getting stolen and treated poorly while they're in somebody else's care. We've all heard the story about coins, precious coins being dumped into a coin star. That's probably not what they were supposed to have had happen to them. They were just found their ways into the wrong hands, and then that was the result. We're talking about floods. We're talking about fires. We're talking about accidentally losing something, maybe throwing it away. So over time, items tend to have fewer available, and that's attrition. And it can work in your favor if you are careful with your items, if you keep them in nice holders, if you keep them in a bank safe deposit box as opposed to keeping it under your bed in a cigar box. We are probably all familiar with the idea that the toys that we had when we were kids eventually become more valuable because we have more financial ability in the future to buy them, and the fewer of them that are available means that the price has gone up. An example would be like baseball cards being stuck in your bicycle spoke to make that rattling noise. Those cards are obviously ruined. Those cards that were kept in a nice folder or folio, kept in a drawer, kept in a stack, whatever, as opposed to those ones that were used, those few survivors often become more valuable than they were in the beginning. Another example would be like comic books. Those that are stored in a box in a garage where they get bugs or animals or get wet and soaked, get ruined. That happens to a lot of items like this. But those that are handled very carefully, put in the right sleeves, put in the right folders, and kept in a nice air-conditioned home, those pieces tend to last, and it's those survivors that tend to be the ones that are available on the market. And the more people that are after them and the fewer pieces there are because of attrition, often, not always, but often the price will go up. So some of the key topics or subjects that I wanted to talk about before, and again, those apply to all of these videos. And you can probably glean little pieces of that as you go into whatever collection you like or whatever it is that you're buying and selling in your life, not even just precious metals, but anything. So let's talk a little bit about some of the 999 pure silver coins from a little bit more of an advanced perspective. What I have here is a roll of silver eagles. And there's nothing special about these other than the fact that these are a 2010 dated roll, and this is probably the third time that roll has ever been opened. I bought these from one of my local coin dealers in 2010. I just decided that I would like to have a roll of those eagles. Unbeknownst to me, the 2010 was not a particularly rare date, but just the fact that time has passed since I bought these, and I looked back at my records, and when I bought these, I have records of pretty much everything that I've bought just so I can keep a running count. In 2010, I paid about $19 a piece for these. So that's the price of silver plus the premium that I was being charged. I looked on eBay right before I started shooting this video, and now these are selling for $37 a piece if you can find them. So a huge increase. Part of that is because the price of silver has increased. Part of that, as you know, if you've tried to buy silver recently, the premiums have gone up quite a bit. But part of it is just over time, there are fewer pieces available, and often more people chasing those fewer pieces, and that's what happens to them. It's true also of these Libertads, and you might recognize these Libertads if you saw some of the earlier videos that I've done. I mentioned that I'm a big fan of Mexican silver coinage. These were originally made to be 1-ounce silver coins, like the Silver Eagles. They were never really intended to be collectible, at least these versions of them. They were just a vehicle for owning physical silver. You know, if you're a collector of the Libertads, that they changed the design after a few years. Honestly, I'm not a huge fan of the new design. I like the old design a lot better. But supply and demand, while they make now 10 to 30 or 40 million Silver Eagles every year, they've really never made more than about 1 million Silver Libertads every year. In some cases, they are considerably smaller than that. And unlike the Silver Eagle, the Silver Libertads have come in fractional sizes, not all the way from the beginning, but going back quite a way. So there's 10th ounce, quarter ounce, half ounce. Not so with the Silver Eagle. I wouldn't be surprised if the Mint eventually begins to release those as well. So an example, or a couple of examples of sovereign coins. Remember, a coin is something that's made by a government that has a denomination on it. In this case, it's either a silver dollar or silver pesos. That were not necessarily made for collectors. These were made as a vehicle for owning physical silver. But over time, because time has passed, because there are fewer available through attrition, and there are more people chasing after them, the price of these items has increased. Now, compare that with the two items that we have up top. This is a silver eagle proof. And this is another one of those kind of strange gray areas. These were originally made to be a silver bullion product, and then the mint started releasing proofs. Proofs are never meant to be a silver bullion product. Those are made for collectors. So at what point do you bridge the gap between something that is not supposed to be a collectible and something that is intentionally designed to be a collectible? I don't own very many items, like I said, that are intentionally designed to be collectible. That's not really interesting to me, but I do have a few examples. This Proof Libertad is a really good example of something that is very similar to the Proof Silver Eagle, not originally meant to be a collectible. They were just supposed to be a vehicle for owning physical silver, and then the Mexican Mint started releasing proofs of them. And the proofs do go up in time sometimes, but sometimes they don't go up as quickly as you might expect them to. And again, that's the concept of whether or not something is intentionally made to be a collectible. The chances of one of these two items being destroyed, melted, lost, whatever, is probably less likely than some of these more typical designed to be silver bullion vehicles. And that attrition affects things that are not supposed to be collected, it seems like, more often than it affects things that are intentionally designed to be collected, with nice little cases and little proof boxes and sleeves and certificates of authenticity. If you want to pursue those, again, the nice thing about physical precious metals is that this is your decision to make. You can make these choices, and there really are no wrong answers as long as you go into a purchase with your eyes open. So some examples of 999 silver with a little bit more advanced topic about whether or not these items will increase in value over time, whether you should consider these items that are intentional bullion products rather than the collector products rather than the bullion products. Let's touch a little bit on the idea of privately made rounds as they relate to these pieces. You might recognize these Engelhard Prospectors. I think I highlighted them in a couple of earlier videos too. Engelhard Prospectors, like the Silver Eagles, were never meant to be collector's item. They were made in pretty large quantities for the precious metals market by Engelhard as a way for people to own silver ounces. And the rounds were probably introduced because bars take a little bit more engineering to make. They cost a little bit more, so silver rounds save a little bit more on the bottom line, add to Engelhard's profit. So they quickly became widely available, and they were pretty successful with people who were buying physical precious metals. But again, they weren't necessarily meant to be a collector's item. Over time, they have, I think, developed a little bit of a reputation. These are things that people would rather have than kind of a generic round. Unlike most rounds, these actually do have a date on them. I believe this is a roll of 1985s. So there is a little bit more collector demand. Again, something that wasn't made to be a collectible, but has become a collectible over time, the passage of time, and with attrition. And here's an interesting example of maybe one step beyond that, kind of like the proofs over here. This is also a roll of Libertads. And when I first was offered this roll, it was sitting in a local dealer's case, and they didn't have anything to compare it to. So to them, it was just a roll of Engelhard Prospectors. But I had a fair amount of experience with these, and there was something unusual about them. And that is, they have an amazing black and white cameo proof-like finish to them. And the time that I bought these, there were just starting to be fakes come on the market. And that's an important thing to remember too, that on some of these items, or on all bullion items, there are fakes out there, so you need to be careful with it. But I took a gamble just because they were so interesting, and my dealer was pretty knowledgeable. I was fairly knowledgeable, and I trusted my own experience. So I took these home, and I weighed them very carefully, and I measured them very carefully, and sure enough, they are silver Prospectors. I was fortunate enough to reach out to allengelhard.com. A lot of you know that website and use it. I think it's a fantastic resource, not just for Engelhard products, but for a variety of vintage bullion items. They are the source of information. I reached out to them and I just kind of asked them what their thoughts were, and that's when they told me that they were early die state Prospectors. There's nothing wrong with them. In fact, they are unusual. Like any coin that's minted, they are minted from dies, which are imprinted with the design that they're supposed to have, and they come together and stamp out the coin. When those dies are first made, they have a proof-like finish to them. They're highly polished, and the coins that come off of those early die state coins, or the coins that are made from those early dies, are often proof-like. That's where we get proof-like coins from the US Mint, and that's exactly where these came from too, these proof-like finished Engelhard Prospectors. So, not originally made to be collectibles, they were just an ounce of silver, but have become collectible over time through attrition and demand and supply. And then you've got, not unlike these proofs up here, a very exceptionally well-made roll of original Engelhard Prospectors with proof-like dies. I'm a big fan of swapping out items from my own personal holdings that don't interest me in favor of things that do interest me. So one of the reasons why I've got these items that I can share with you is because over time, I've gotten rid of my kind of common items whenever I see something that's a little bit more interesting. All other things being equal, if it's the same price, if it's the same premium, if it doesn't cost me anymore, or if the difference is very, very small, I look for those opportunities and I cycle out of my more common stuff for stuff that's a little bit more unusual. I mentioned Engelhard, and those of you who follow the earlier videos or know me from online know that I'm a big fan of the early vintage refineries. And of course, when you talk about Engelhard, Johnson Matthey is the other one that comes up. So this is an example of Johnson Matthey's kind of answer to the Engelhard. Johnson Matthey has released a few different types of rounds. One of those types of rounds that they've released that seems to be popular, it kind of goes in cycles, is their freedoms, their 12 freedoms. They kind of align with the Bill of Rights. A lot of people have those. If you don't own them yourself, you might have seen them before. And I think that that was kind of an effort for JM to compete with the Prospector. I don't think they ever caught on quite as strongly. And oddly enough, it doesn't seem like the prices for those Bill of Rights or early freedoms, 12 freedoms, ever seems to be quite as high as really nice Prospectors. It comes and goes. Sometimes they're a little bit higher, sometimes they're a little bit less. Unfortunately, I didn't put my examples out with this listing, or with this video. So these were actually made in the mid-1980s for the precious metals company that supplies big governments and big corporations out of New York, I believe. That's Manfra, Tordella, and Brooks. So MTB, Manfra, Tordella, and Brooks, they put out this series in the mid-1980s. And interestingly, this one was made by Johnson Matthey. And you can see, if my glare is not too strong, I believe down here at the very bottom there's a small JM logo with the crossed hammers. And then this one, made by Engelhard, and if you look down at the same spot, you can see the Engelhard E. I'll try to bring it a little bit and see if you can see it. Not huge premium on these, but they are more unusual. Not every round is going to be valuable over time. There are sweet spots that you have to find with the right manufacturer that has the right number of people that are following it, that are interested in it, who collect it. The price has to be right. That scarcity has to be there. That attrition has to be there. And if all things work out perfectly, things sometimes increase in value. Examples of kind of more scarce pieces that might have a bit of a premium over just kind of a generic round, but they don't ever seem to be hitting those super high heights that some rare collectibles do. So, an introduction to 999 silver bullion for the more advanced collector. I want to reiterate that I have a lot of experience with these types of items, but I am by no means an expert in them. There are some of you out there who have a lot more experience than I do, who know so much more about these type of products than I do. And I applaud you, and hopefully I'll get a chance to learn from you as well. But I've been doing this for several decades. These are some of the things that I've found to be interesting when it comes to 999 silver bullion coins, or at least those 1 ounce rounds. The future videos that we'll be making will detail some of the different size offerings from foreign countries domestically that come from the United States. Some of the other things that are out there and options in terms of 999 silver for the advanced collector outside of the world of silver bars, and we'll talk about silver bars in some different videos. To recap really quickly, some of the key concepts, we're looking at buying and holding versus trying to flip something quickly. I'm a big fan of holding for the long period of time. Is something made intentionally to be a collectible? And if it is, does that mean more examples will survive rather than those pieces that were never meant to be collectible that seem to have maybe sometimes a little bit more collector interest? Can you time a market versus buying and holding for a long period of time? I've found that I've never been able to do that. I don't like to even try to do that. If I find something I like, it goes into the collection and it stays there usually until I find something else more interesting. And then that concept of attrition, the idea that over time, all things being equal, some things will happen to collectibles or really anything, whether it's a fire, a flood, an earthquake, something getting stolen, something getting melted, even as simple as something being dropped or mishandled while you're shooting a video about them. All of those things reduce the population of those items, while often, not always, the number of people who are interested in them continues to grow. So over time, that attrition, that loss, sometimes makes items more valuable. If you like this video, by all means, subscribe to the channel. I'd love to share more titles with you. If you have any questions about any of the things that we've talked about in this video, if you have any suggestions for future videos, by all means, leave a comment down below and I'll try to get to it as quickly as I can. And once again, thank you very much for allowing us to be part of your journey deeper into physical precious metals.